Ashley Smith, real estate, investing, branding. Yes, or both of those things. This was such a great episode, whether you're in BC, wherever you are in the world, whether you're thinking about investing in a first property, whether you have never even thought about it.
Or buying again. We talked about buying again if you already have property.
And being a creative entrepreneur, because I didn't realize that real estate agents, the way that they are traditionally structured, I really didn't see behind the curtain of how they operate. And so
marketing, huge into marketing.
Yeah. So if this works, this is so transferable. I never realized how transferable real estate and working within that field is such a creative venture. So here we go. I mean, Ashley's such a perfect person to speak to. I met her on Clubhouse. We've had multiple chats. She's, huge into board governance and is, top 40 under 40, millions of views on TikTok and YouTube. And I think you're going to this is something for anyone who's creative or wants to live in a home. That's it.
It's perfect.
Watch this space.
Enjoy the show. You're listening to Bombshell Brunches, where your hosts Raquel Rudenberg and Christina Lau sip and spill with badass babes every Tuesday morning.
Oh, hi, Bombshells. I am so happy that I finally get to chat to Ashley. I mean, Raquel, I don't really care so much about because I chat to her all the time. Let's be honest. Okay, so I want to introduce you to Ashley, who is a licensed realtor. Since 2008, Ashley Smith is keen to participate in the real estate profession and to help shape its future in an exciting and fast-evolving landscape. As a young leader in the BC business community, she was recognized by Business in Vancouver with a Top 40 Under 40 award. Love that. Congratulations. For her business, Ashley leans heavily into social media and video to build community, authority, and brand awareness. We actually met on Clubhouse, so that's a story for later. A self-proclaimed governance nerd, love it. Ashley has 10 years of leadership experience in organized real estate, recently serving the Real Estate Board of Greater Vancouver as its youngest president in the organization's 100-year history in 2019 and 2020, representing over 14,000 realtors. In 2021, Ashley was appointed a director's seat with the BC Real Estate Association. Most importantly, Ashley and I have random Clubhouse chats with multiple glasses of wine / cider while I am somehow managing to burn ramen on a stove filled with water and miso. So that is how I know Ashley, is through toasty cider and wine chats, which is always my best way of meeting people. So welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, ladies. I love it. Thank you for having me.
And you're so impressive. Like, even when we spoke on Clubhouse and, just the way that you engage with people, I really do want to talk about how you use social media to build community, because you've really embraced it. And you and I have both, we've seen each other on Instagram, and this is the first time I've seen your moving face in real Zoom time-ish, whatever you call it, screen time. So I want to talk about that. But first I want to talk to you about why you got into real estate and exactly what kind of real estate work you do.
Yeah. So thanks. I sell residential real estate, so condos, houses in and around the Greater Vancouver area. At the time when I got started, I lived in the Fraser Valley. I grew up in Surrey. I was in Langley at the time, and my sort of evolution into real estate is pretty boring and slightly cliche. So I bought a property very young, younger than I should have. I didn't come from any money. My boyfriend and I moved out at 18. We lived in Surrey. And in those days, buying a condo was probably about the same cost as renting. And he had some money from a car accident, so we went for it. And so there we went, got into the real estate market as like 19, 20-year-olds.
Wow.
And at that time, the market was booming. So we were fortunate to get in when we did. And we sold our first property with what we felt was a crazy profit. Like it was more money than, at the time, it felt like a lot. And that piqued my interest, I guess. And at that time I was going to college. I was working full time. I was working part time. I was paying for my, post-secondary, all that stuff. And I loved school. But I was kind of one of those like academics that liked to be in school, but didn't really have any direction and didn't know what the hell I was going to do. Meanwhile, I, had a mortgage. So, and at that time, this was before the big sort of recession of 2008. Like I basically got licensed right when the housing market crashed in the US, and we saw, obviously residual impact of that here in Vancouver. But prior to that, it was like HGTV all the time, all day, every day, like HGTV.
What is HGTV?
I hate to. It's a home and garden television.
Oh.
So like Flip This House or Love It or List It, like those kind of shows. And I just loved them. And obviously having gone through buying a property, selling it, buying another property, I sort of felt, this is something interesting that I'd like to look into doing. And maybe I can start a career versus, working, my part-time retail or full-time retail job that I had been working while going to school.
What were you studying at school?
I was not interested in business. I was mostly like the arts and social sciences, sociology, anthropology, English, lit, political science, those kinds of things, philosophy. Mm-hmm. So I loved it. Mm-hmm. I really enjoyed it. I was a good student, but I had no path. Like I didn't have any goals or trajectory kind of laid out in front of me. So I didn't even really think of getting into real estate as being an entrepreneur. I didn't know what an entrepreneur was. Really, my folks were very blue collar, 9 to 5 folks. And that's it. They were scared as hell when I got into real estate because you don't know if you're going to earn an income. And
tell us a little bit more about that, because actually I think a lot of people don't know. They don't think, if you're a real estate agent, like what does that profession actually look like?
Yeah. So, I should preface it with, I think that business models are going to change moving into the future. I think there's going to be a lot more salaried or hourly opportunities, probably. Like you're seeing certain businesses coming, at least in the US right now, where they're taking a different approach to real estate. So could be different, but generally speaking, traditionally, it's commission based, right? So you take listings from sellers and you usually pay quite a bit of money up front to market a property, to take pictures and advertise it, get floor plans, and nowadays like 3D virtual tours, like it's not cheap, right, to take a listing and market it well. And I think expectations and standards are just continuously elevated.
Is that your cost, sorry?
Which is
as a real estate?
Yeah. Generally speaking, yes.
Oh.
So we take, like I easily spend $1,500 just out the bat just to put a property on the market, to do it well the way I want to.
So sorry, I'm going to get really nitty gritty about this because this is such a hot topic for so many people that I know and for myself as well. So I'm going to get really nitty gritty. So you are spending $1,500, but if that property, you're putting that on as a risk, right? So you're like, if that property doesn't sell or it doesn't sell for the amount that I want, if you're selling it, obviously the commission will probably be high enough that it covers that cost. But if someone's first getting into real estate and they don't have anything behind them and they're now just trying to list 3 or 4 properties, that to me equates to me saying you need to have some money in the bank. If you're starting as a realtor, just to kick you off, you need 10 grand to be able to cover those things in order to be able to sell the property. Is that right?
I would say yes, mostly. I would say when I started, it was a little different because it wasn't, we weren't doing as many of the things as we do today. Okay. But that also said, you typically don't get paid until a transaction closes. So even if you're lucky enough to get a listing on day one, which never happens, and you're lucky enough to sell it right away, if it closes in 3 months, you get paid in 3 months. So you should enter the business with some cushion. However, we can get into this, but there's just so many ways you can approach the business, and I probably would have done it differently had I known more. So, finding a team, working underneath someone, maybe you get a split with that person and they cover the costs,
right,
that kind of a thing. And then you learn from them and they're your mentor, or you start as a unlicensed or a licensed assistant and you might get paid perhaps hourly, or there's different models that people create for that type of a position. So there are different ways for entry, I guess.
That's cool.
Although I would say most folks get in thinking, I'm going to go in, I'm going to be a realtor, I'm going to do this. So yes, if you're doing it that way, have some money set aside, because it usually takes some time, especially to build enough momentum to feel that you can kind of have the consistency you might want to, that's why it's actually very difficult for realtors to get mortgages.
Right. Well, it's like a business owner.
Oh yeah.
It's an entrepreneur. All entrepreneurs. You have to have a stable business for years before a bank will trust it to give you a loan.
Yeah. So there's exactly. Yeah. So there's a lot more to it. And I know in a market where it's how it is right now, it's fast paced and the public generally just sees the sales. They just see the sales happening and thinking, everyone's making lots of money.
And I think that's one of the things I wanted to kind of debunk there, because a lot of what we talk about on the show is unveiling the things behind the scenes that we think are so glamorous. And you look at these you look like a glamazon anyway. So you kind of like swan in and you're like, here's some beautiful stuff and big, beautiful houses and all of that. And it's like the duck with the feet underwater analogy. And you're kind of, as a real estate agent of any nature, working in real estate, trying hectically to understand the market, understand your clients, understand, what's a good price point, find the right buyer, find the right seller, whatever the situation is. So are there resources that people can go to, both as someone who's looking to invest, but also as someone who's looking to get into real estate? Obviously you're on the real estate board. Where's the best place if you're a realtor to kind of go to for support? And where's the best place? I'm a member of CHOA, the Condominium Homeowners Association. So where are the two best places to go if you're first thinking about either entering the market as an estate agent or entering the market as a buyer?
Yeah, so I think if you're looking at entering the market as a realtor, obviously there's support and systems, and they're getting better too. Every year there's more and more, and the sort of barrier to entry, while some might argue is too low, it's still improving. So the cost is getting higher, the education parameters are getting higher. So there are certain professional development stuff that happens right off the bat when pre-licensing and post-licensing. But I'd say number one is really about choosing the right brokerage that's going to offer training and hands-on kind of engagement, because every brokerage is different, and we could argue which model is better. Obviously, there's certain costs to joining brokerages that offer more services, but I think when you're starting out, it's so important, not only so you can get the right insight how to build a successful business and have somebody that's going to mentor you and have people help you understand, every deal looks different. Even though you're trained and taught how to deal with contracts, you still need to kind of navigate. Even today, I still have to navigate, maybe writing clauses differently, etc. So having those people that you can trust and have advisors is really important. And then while there's all these external sources, I think that's it. Find a great managing broker, maybe find a team within your office. If you're not looking to join a team, at least seek out mentors. One thing I think that people from outside of the industry may be surprised by is that realtors generally are they're very giving people. They're very outgoing people. A lot of them are very happy to take you under their wing and help you. They love to talk about themselves. That's why I'm here. I'm happy to sit down. It happens often. People will call and, pre-COVID, go for a coffee, sit down, talk about, what people, what should I do? What should I be looking for? That kind of thing. So there's a lot of people out there that will offer, guidance, I think. So I think that's number one. Then there's coaching, then there's other programs, there's other professional development that's offered. But when you're first starting, it's so overwhelming, right? So I think just figuring out how to keep a level head. It's and then for the consumer, honestly, I think it's about finding a realtor. I know there's other resources out there, but I think that people get nervous around salespeople, right? They don't really want to feel like they're going to be attacked.
Yeah.
Someone's going to sell to them. But again, I think there's a lot of great people out there that if you're just really upfront with them, saying, I don't know what my intentions are right now. I just want to understand my options. I might not be thinking to purchase for another 2 years, but I really want to understand, how to navigate the market, or who should I be talking to about setting up my finances properly. And mortgage brokers are also, they're very important in this process. Sure, the banks, etc. But I would say finding a mortgage broker who's used to building relationships, who wants to build a portfolio of clients, and they're happy to, many of them are happy to offer guidance, even if it's just planning, and not necessarily a guaranteed deal or a client or whatever, because most of our businesses are they're based on reputation, right? So if that person, if something doesn't come out of it, that's okay. Usually they're going to refer you somebody down the road because you were so helpful or they trust you. So I think people, while there's so much information online, and I think there's a lot you can do now versus 10 years ago to understand, what the listings are looking like and what kind of properties are out there, and maybe even some sales activity and prices and trends. Sorry, I'm blabbing, but I have clients right now who are thinking of moving outside of the lower mainland. They're thinking, I might go to the island. I might go to the Okanagan. I might go where, all these different and so I set them up with realtors in all those areas, and I just very transparent. They might not move there. It's okay. They're purely informational exploration right now. And that's what we do.
What? I think that's so valid. I actually did exactly that when I was trying to decide. I was kind of at this fork in the road, and I was like, should I stay here and apply for a mortgage because I had kind of a nest egg big enough for a down payment? Should I do all of that, or should I go get my master's? And I was kind of in that pivotal point. So I ended up talking to a mortgage broker, and I told her this is the dilemma I was between, and made sure she knew up front that, I wasn't sure where I was going to go with it. But she basically sat me down. We went through all of my numbers, figured out what I could apply for, what I could get. And then I was able to take a much better look at what was in front of me and decide what was most important at that stage in my life. How fast do I think I could move back after my master's and, re-up if that's what I decided to do. So it just gave you so much more information so you can make the most informed decision that you can. And that's something that we talk about a lot as well, is just really making informed decisions. And I think you're exactly right. You can find stuff online, but it's a different story when you just sit down with an expert and you can actually talk to them. And, I built a relationship with her. So of course, when I come back, when I'm ready to re-enter, I will be giving her a call. She was phenomenal. So I definitely would prescribe to that. Pick up the phone, find someone you trust, ask friends, and then...
And manage the expectation on both sides, right? I think a good, I actually, so full disclosure, I bought my place with the help of my family. And I think that I tell this story a lot. I had very little, I had $100 in my bank at the time. And so many people are like, there are so many myths that people say, you will never be able to afford it. You will never be able to buy it. There's just so many things that people say. And I'm like, we need to be more creative about this, because I understand that it's way more difficult than it ever was. But that doesn't help someone who's 20 years old, who's trying to get their first mortgage. All that you're doing is terrifying them by saying it's a really tough market. It's not what it used to be. It's not what it used to be, and it isn't what it's going to be. So it's not helpful. But I had so little money, and yet, and I actually bought my place because of the seller's real estate agent. not because of my real estate agent. And I will be fully honest, I was not overly impressed with my real estate agent. I actually had to convince her that it was the right choice. So when we talk about real estate and people investing, how much should we know as a consumer first? Like, for example, and I'm just going to say this from a condo perspective, if you're looking at an apartment, I didn't know in Vancouver to check about the rain screening. I didn't know to check about depreciation reports. I didn't think until I started digging to go and speak to the Strata president. I actually joined the Strata Council because I was like, I need to know exactly what I'm getting into, because I can only afford an under $500,000 property, way under $500,000 if I'm totally honest. And I bought a few years ago when there were 5 properties available at that price. So I had to know if I was going to jump in to a ship that was like a Titanic, or a ship that was like had some holes but was potentially on the mend. And that requires research, and that requires an understanding that a lot of the time people don't know what questions to ask. So what are some of the questions that you would say to, I mean, I want to talk later about investing in general, and when the best time is to get into the market, but what are some questions that you would ask a realtor to establish whether or not they're good at what they do?
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead. Raquel,
No, I thought it was a good. It wasn't where I thought it was going, but it was a good question.
I meander.
So I think number one is, you're kind of hitting the nail on the head, is to talk to them first, right? Like, I think traditionally speaking, people tend to be a little more proactive when they're sellers in terms of finding the realtor that fits their needs. Mm-hmm. They, not everybody, but many will interview several realtors. They'll get their opinions on values, they'll get their marketing proposals and strategies, and then they'll evaluate, who they want to hire to serve their needs and their expectations, right? I think from the buyer's side and the investor's side, that doesn't happen as often. It's very much a referral-based business, which I think is very good, but sometimes I think it stops there. My mom knows someone who's a realtor. I'll use that person. I do think there's value in being upfront and saying, I'm going to chat with a few realtors just to see who I vibe with. And I think part of it isn't just about what you ask that person, but from gauging what they're asking you.
I like that.
Right? So they can understand what your priorities are. They can understand where your knowledge gaps are. They can help you understand the things you don't know to ask. And I think that that's a good question to ask is, what don't I know? What do you think I don't know? What questions should I be asking you in my search? I think more and more, my general experience is realtors tend to be very good at helping their clients navigate this market. But that doesn't mean all of them are going to be, I don't know, as go in as much depth as maybe you'd like them to.
Yeah.
And so due diligence, especially this year, has been a tough part of the conversation when people are putting in offers, without any conditions, because that's what they feel they need to do in order to get the property. And in many cases, that's probably true. And so what do you need to do to mitigate risk? What do you need to do to prepare yourself? And to prepare yourself, like, what unknowns are there and how comfortable are you with risk? Is probably very important, not just with your personality type, but also financially speaking. So I do think just setting up a formal process of, I'm interviewing you, I'm talking to a few other agents. Maybe you've gotten some referrals from people who had good experiences. Maybe you did a little extra searching online, perhaps based on a market area, for example, someone that you've seen doing a lot of business in that area, and then asking them, like, what do you think I need to know? What are the top 3 things I should be thinking about as I'm entering this space? And like you said, condos, there's so much to think about, often much more than buying a detached home. There's just more going on, right? So just never-ending questions, I think, is don't be afraid to keep them coming.
And I think, sorry, go on, Raquel.
No, that's okay. That's my way of ending a sentence without knowing how I'm ending.
No, I was going to say, it's funny. My Oma, my grandmother, she was actually a real estate agent in Vancouver as well for many years. And one thing that she always says is that in real estate, you become a couple or a single person's best friend or family friend, like the closest person they have, for a super short amount of time. So you just become this super concentrated relationship because this is a huge step in their life and you're holding their hand through it the whole time. It's kind of like, you know, when someone's about to give birth and they have their doctor, they become really close there too, or a midwife. So this person becomes someone that you're relying on and that you're trusting, and you build a real strong rapport with them really quickly. So talking about vibing right, yes, you want to make sure the practices work, but you also want to actually vibe with them. You're going to spend a lot of time with them, and that matters.
See, you know what's interesting is that I did not have that experience at all. I I said I wanted to buy a place and put my offer in within 5 weeks. And it was amazing, but I did not feel like, and I think that's again where it comes down to like the type of personality. Whereas I'm the type of person that like, I'm really social, but if you don't know how to do your research, and if I challenge you and you don't know the answer to something, and you don't go ahead and go and find that answer, like I don't care how much I like you, you are not going to help me invest $500,000. Like that's just not a. So for me, I'm like, I don't want you to be my friend. I don't want you to be my friend. I want you to do your job. And that is, and knowing that and knowing whatever the vibe is, whereas some people, they're like, this is such an emotional thing, but I am someone who's lived in so many different places that I don't treat real estate like an emotional thing. I treat real estate like an investment. So I think I like that you brought that up, Raquel, because there may well come a time where I do need that kind of real estate agent where I'm not in a rush. And I think taking an audit of where you're at in your life and why you want this real estate is really important, because I was very clear that my family and I spoke about this, and it was like, this is an investment that we're going to make that I'm not going to live in forever, that needs to fit into all of these other categories. And so doing that first real estate audit and then having the conversations is really, really important, so that you understand how emotionally attached you are or aren't, so that you're not then pulled along by potentially a real estate agent that thinks that you're really emotional about this, when really I'm like, lady, this is fine. This is fine. Like, I don't care. This is enough. I can't show me another property that can serve these purposes. You can't.
But I think it's not about being overly emotional with your real estate agent. I think it's about vibing the right way. So maybe if she wasn't on that same vibe, you would have felt that right away and been like, this might not be a good fit. And you just wouldn't have had that friction.
But I didn't know, because I didn't manage that expectation in my mind before.
You didn't know
I didn't know to. Yeah. So this is why we're having this this is why this is such a great chat. It's like, oh shit. Yeah. There's different reasons to invest. Yeah. Especially at different ages or at different phases of your life, I should say. Right. So when is the best time?
I mean, it's so hard. I mean, everyone I always says is the best time is now. But I would argue that maybe that's not necessarily true. I think it depends, right? It depends where you're coming from, what your current situation is, not just in terms of like your life and your career or school or whatever, your family life. But also, you know, are you renting in a place where the cost is comfortable and you can expect to be able to stay there for the next 2 years at a, you know, at a predictable price? You know, the last 6 months have been bonkers. If you didn't have to buy in the last 6 months because you didn't see an upside to it for one reason or another, in terms of maybe you had a property to sell and you were going to make gains on that side, or you felt that it was time to relocate because now you had new work, remote work options, maybe it wouldn't have been the best time because you were competing, and even when it's a business decision, I find in that environment can get emotional, you know, in a different way, just a heightened sense of urgency, making decisions that you're less comfortable with. And it really depends on who you are, right? I think the market it may not feel like it for some, but we are seeing a change in pace a little bit. So I'd keep your eyes out for that. You know, I think what we're thinking about moving forward is what the inventory and supply side looks at, because supply has been very, very low, and that's been contributing factor, obviously, to the heightened market conditions. Demand has been high, but now as demand's been slowing, supply is still a little slower too. If supply picks up, that I'd be watching for that. Once you start seeing properties on the market for longer periods of time, if you start seeing property listings expiring, for example, you're going to see more opportunities. I think at the end of the day, like, you're never going to get a good deal if you're competing with 12 people. That's just not going to happen. You're paying top dollar and you're probably doing very little due diligence. And in that case, you're buying that property because it's the property you really want, right? That is what it is. It's hard to call it an investment. However, that being said, we know that real estate in Vancouver tends to go up. And if you have a longer term perspective and you're thinking from 10 years, even if you perhaps quote unquote overpaid today, you're probably still going to have a reasonably sound investment in 10 years, probably. Yeah. Right. So I think it really depends. But I think the key thing is, obviously interest rates are historically low. There's a lot that's going on. I think number one is just making sure if you're going to be buying that you're prepared to buy. So if you're not prepared to buy now, evaluating how you can best prepare yourself for when the time is right for you is a good thing to do.
Is there a checklist? Is there something that, that is available online that says, hey, you want to buy a property? Cool. Do you have full-time job? 10,000 extra dollars. I'm just making this is my favorite sound effect as a check.
That's a good, I'm sure there's lots of lists out there. I'm not sure there's like a central one that we all think about.
I wish there was.
I know. And you're right. Like one thing a lot of people often don't think about, even if they bought before, a lot of people don't think about the deposit and how that works. Separate from the down payment and how to be prepared for that. Like, if folks have lived in their property for 5-10 years and most of their money is in their equity, how do you make sure that you actually have funds available to provide a deposit within perhaps a week of putting that offer down, right? Those are things that I think a lot of people forget or don't know of. But I do think that's, talking to a realtor, you'll probably get their version of the list. Usually that ends up leading towards, once again, talking to a mortgage broker. They're usually the ones that are much better equipped to help you build that list out.
So step one, mortgage broker, find out what your qualifying amount is. Question though, there are mortgage brokers that are potentially paid by banks or other lenders. How does that work? Because I want to understand that.
Yeah, so my understanding, so there's a difference obviously between the banks and mortgage brokers, right? The biggest difference is that the representatives from the banks work for the banks. They offer you the bank's products and services. And if that particular person is no longer with that bank, then you just get a new representative next time you need to work with them. And they're only going to offer you what they have, right? And they're getting paid from the company they're representing. Mortgage brokers, they generally speaking can offer a wide variety of mortgage products, oftentimes from the same banks, and sometimes even at better rates, depending on what their relationships are and what their kind of portfolio looks like. And that's probably the most I can say about that. But generally speaking, if you're entering a traditional kind of lending situation, then yes, they'll get remunerated by the lender. It will be disclosed to you, but at the end of the day, they're representing you, not the lender. But they have to get paid somehow. Yes. There can be more alternative financing situations that can happen from time to time depending on your needs. But that's typically the way that it works.
Awesome.
So I want to dive into your branding, because you have branded yourself really, really well, and you've done some really amazing things. So I think one thing that I've been watching a lot recently on social is like that tipping point of people doing the professional space and they're doing the lifestyle blogger, Instagrammer type space. So how do you navigate? How do you keep super professional? And then also, I happen to know your industry also has a lot of like different generation in it still. So how do you navigate the professionalism in that? Because it didn't, now I think it's a bit different, but it didn't used to always be really something that people looked at as a marketing opportunity. It was almost seen as vain. Like it was this weird juxtaposition. Now I've got people who are, you know, in their 60s trying to learn how to do social media because they realize it's such a great thing. But how did you navigate that earlier in your career?
Well, first off, I remember probably around 2009 started using Facebook, and I just was like, I'm going to use this because it's free. And I had no money. So like, I'm going to play around. So a lot of it was just trial and error, right? And just see what sticks. And I think I had some success with it. And looking back, I wish I had done more consistently, like around a strategy rather than just kind of ad hoc, which is still kind of what I do now, really. But I think the answer is going to be different for everybody, right? What's appropriate for them. For myself, you know, I like being in front of people. I like showing my personality. I've actually been slightly MIA from social media the last couple months, which I'll get into maybe later. But that's not because I'm not into it. It's mostly because I'm distracted. But, you know, I think what I'm not a fan of is the like going to someone's Instagram page and it looks like the back of like the Georgia Strait like advertising pages, you know, where you see
like
is the Well, yeah, and I get the point. Like and I would rather someone do that than nothing. I think there's value. You're showing, you know, that you're busy and that you're active and maybe some of your expertise. But for me, I more and more want to work with people who resonate with me, who I don't have to prove to them why maybe using social media marketing as a tool for their property makes sense. When they contact me, they get it, right? So there's a difference between like the social profiles and the social proof versus like some of the marketing and advertising strategies that perhaps many people don't see because it's paid and it's, you know, you're only seeing it if I want you to see it kind of a thing. But for, you know, and I'm quite open on social. I'm definitely myself and I'm probably more casual. But I also, I don't share a lot of my private life necessarily. I'm mindful of that mostly because I think about what I want to see and I have certain things that I like and I don't like. When I was, I'm now involved with the BC Real Estate Association, but when I was involved with the real estate board, especially when I had a public profile, I was very considerate mostly of like, I'm also representing this organization, not just me. So, you know, there's certain things I'm going to do and other things I'm not going to do. But I just, you know, if people Google me, I have one of the most common names out there, Ashley Smith, but you're going to find me online because of all my activity, right? And I want people, you know, if you get a referral from somebody, they Google me and they can see, oh yeah, she actually, you know, she's very creative with her marketing and you can tell she's taking things to the next level and she seems like a nice person and trustworthy and all that kind of stuff. So I think that matters. It's less to me about, you know, people always ask about the ROI of social media. And for me, it's not really about that. It's more about awareness and like reputation.
It's the long game. It's totally, it's the long game. So you're building rapport, you're building trust because they can see that consistency over a year, 2 years, 3 years, whatever, that you've been posting this type of content. They've seen your face. They trust you.
Yeah. And there's so much opportunity to give value. And that's like, I feel like I've done that intermittently. Again, coming down to consistency, it's something I'd like to lean into more heavily. Like, you can talk about the market, you can talk about your insights, you can talk about some of the educational stuff, perhaps that that we're talking about right here, little snippets that you can hopefully people might find helpful. So I think there's a lot of ways to showcase your value as well,
and your values.
So it just depends on your style.
Your value and your values. I always talk about, posting at its most rudimentary level, because I'm a throw shit at the wall kind of person as well. I'm like, is this whatever? I'm trying new things. But if it needs to either educate, entertain, or inspire, or educate, engage, inspire. And if it hits one of those three things, if it hits more than one of those three things, then it's generally a good metric to use if you know nothing about social media and nothing about branding. And I think Clubhouse definitely taught me a lot about that. Was, is this something that's informative or is it engaging? And Clubhouse was really engagement heavy. So we tested some rooms and we were like, well, if we talk at people or try and just too strongly inform, people get bored and they get audio fatigue. So if they are encouraged to be up there and speak, if they're encouraged to have an opinion, to weigh in, and I think that's why podcasts and shows that are engaging different guests and different people and sharing collective expertise, or I like to call it facilitative leadership, if that's a term. If it isn't, then trademark Christina Lau 2021. But facilitative leadership is a term I use a lot, and being able to do that on social media, I think, is the way forward.
Can you talk to us a little bit about your strategy for your social media? So let's just say we'll pick one channel. So let's just take Instagram, for example. How long is it taking you to post? What type of content are you trying to post? And then feed versus stories. And how much are you staying on top of things? Do you work with somebody?
Okay, so I'm just gonna again preface this with like the last 2 months I've been like super MIA. I've actually been on Instagram.
Tell us why.
I've gone deep down the NFT rabbit hole, and so I've been heavily like in my spare time in that. I have some accounts around that and different social media stuff around that. And so I've been neglecting my stuff. So, but I'm back. It's been summer, you know.
Summer does it.
But I will get to your question. One thing I will mention is I was getting people, I'm not like a pick up the phone. Like I don't talk to my friends that way. Like I don't pick up the phone and call people. I just have never really been that way. And I was getting people calling me, texting me, DMing me, like, are you okay? Where are you? Because they recognized my absence from social media, which shocked me. So I think you don't realize like how much of an impact your social media efforts can have. So I was like, okay, no, everything's totally fine. I've just gone down my ADHD like rabbit hole. Sorry, guys, I'll be back. But back to your question, I think I do not have a very rigid strategy around anything, Instagram included. I like to have a balance of, photos, videos, stories. There was an interesting tidbit I picked up from someone, which I've been neglecting, but someone literally like set an alarm in their phone for every like 3 hours. And then they just like take a picture and do a story, like just wherever they were, no matter what was going on.
That's what I said I need to start doing.
It's kind of interesting. But, I think that at the end of the day, for the foreseeable future, this short form video is where it's at. So like if you want to have an impact and you want to grow your accounts, that's what you have to be doing. And I could be wrong, but I heard somewhere, God knows where, but Instagram's going to be leaning away from photos being the primary.
Yes.
Which seems obvious, but I don't know that they had declared it, but I think they've declared it.
Yes, they have.
So like I love TikTok. I was on TikTok reasonably early, and that's what I had the luxury of being very anonymous for probably 6 months on TikTok because no one I knew was on it. So I was kind of just playing and doing lots of random stuff on there. And it got me quite comfortable. And then once Instagram kind of opened up the reels, I'm like, okay, I'm going to start doing this. And, I had a few videos go viral that's interesting to be able to have that and see the growth and the exposure you can have from that type of activity. So
we talk about TikTok a lot, and I try to avoid the conversation.
No, she doesn't try to avoid it. She shuts it down. Like, slam the
right.
door,
Yes.
runs in the opposite direction.
Yeah, I slam the door, and then I
She's like, I will quit. I will quit if you want me to go on TikTok.
because it just causes me so much anxiety. I'm just like, I don't want
because you
another.
do all that kind of stuff on your own
Yeah.
Instagram anyways.
Yeah, and that's enough. That's enough. I'm like, when I do something, I'm like, and this is the thing, I think on social media, you have to know what your capacity is. Because I'm like, I will do up to this point, and then when I'm done, I'm like, no, I'm done now. That's enough. There's no more.
You know, it's crazy though, because I feel like that is where so much of this has stemmed from, and that's where the ideas are born, and then they just get kind of regurgitated on the other platforms, and the other platforms are trying to figure out how to duplicate the process.
Right.
You know, I'm not going to convince you, but that, you know, I've had several videos go viral on TikTok, and I'll just usually just repost the stuff and kind of try to make it a little more native. But I have a couple accounts. I had one video go quite viral on TikTok, and then I threw it up on YouTube.
What does that mean?
YouTube
Quite
Shorts.
viral? How many?
4 million views, I think,
And
on
what
TikTok.
what were you doing?
Wait, YouTube
wait,
Shorts.
I have to
YouTube
tell you the-
Shorts. I haven't played around with it.
Yeah, okay.
Get me.
So I put that one particular, I put a ton of videos on YouTube for YouTube Shorts. I had that same video, 35 million views on YouTube.
Hot
What was the
dang.
video about?
It was about, I wasn't even in it. My colleague was in it, but it was I took it, I put it together, I put the music in it. It was a looking at, we weren't talking, looking at the bottomless pool in Yaletown, there in the Arc building. And so it was just, it's the highest glass bottom pool in Canada. And it just went crazy. So we were getting in the habit of doing live virtual tours at new real estate developments around. Yeah. And you know what, honestly, it's been a little bit of time since I've done it, but we were doing it very regularly, especially when before the market got really crazy.
Right.
And we were just having fun playing with like interior design elements. And like it spawned some business ideas that hopefully, you know, we pursue and execute on. But it's nothing like these short form videos if they take off.
So let me just I want to spin this into, okay, so a lot of our audience are creative entrepreneurs, they're creatively minded. You have a product, and then you did a short that went viral that still associated you with the product that you are selling or the service that you're providing, right? In some way, even though it's not like necessarily directly.
That's right.
But it gives you that clout. How does someone figure out from their creative perspective, let's say there's a sound engineer or a producer or a dance studio, how did you conceptualize that idea and then make sure that it still associates you as the now expert in that field? Because you see this luxury piece, you see this bottomless glass thing, and you're like, oh, these are some fun people who are doing this awesome stuff, but also know their shit.
Yeah. So with that stuff, two parts. One is consuming on the platform. So on TikTok, to start, consuming and seeing and understanding how it's used, and where you can kind of feel it. It's almost second nature. You can feel when someone's trying and they don't quite get it, or you can tell someone's it's very organic and it's made for the platform. You understand certain sounds, when they're heavily used and maybe viral, and how they're being used and how to have an impact with them. You learn how, what's too long, what's too short, depending on what it is. So I think consuming as a consumer, like, and not just out of research, like not just diving into the one niche, but more just like enjoy it, what resonates. And then you start to see like what's happening. You notice trends and that kind of thing. And I don't just mean trends as in like the trends of the day and what people are doing, but more the what's working
for the platform
and et cetera.
overall. Yeah.
The platform overall, and then how it changes. You start, like, I hadn't been on it for a little while, so then I popped on recently, and I go, oh, it's changed since I was on, and so be a little different. And what was my second part? I think, you know, at the end of the day, with this kind of stuff, like, so we have a channel that's really catered towards exploring new developments and looking at design elements. And really, we weren't trying to sell ourselves at all, but we like the affiliation, right? And now we have a YouTube channel that has almost 30,000 subscribers that went literally because of several videos that kind of took off, including that one. So now we have a lot more social proof. Now we can go to developers and say, hey, we have an audience.
Yeah.
Right? So it's not so much about selling something to the audience, but figuring out how do you create something that becomes saleable elsewhere one way or another, if that makes sense. That's kind of what I'm thinking. Yeah. And I think not trying to make it into something it's not trying to overproduce it.
It's authentic. You're taking stuff from what you actually are working in. And what's interesting.
And I mean, it might be different for someone, for example, like yourself. Like if you're an actor and you're in entertainment, then you might have certain things that are more front facing, like for yourself, that, you know, have some sort of character or something of that nature. And some of my real estate stuff, like my personal one is blended with real estate. I'll talk about the market and it's more front facing. But some of this other stuff, like I literally just go out and I just use my phone and I pick video in portrait mode of things I think are interesting. And later I'll go and kind of look at me like, oh, can I do something with this? Splice it together, maybe do a voiceover. And that's like, I didn't plan on this video. I just saw something that looked interesting and used it.
I think that's a really good point. Yeah, I love everything you're saying, because I think that's a really important understanding of how to be resilient and responsive with social media. And that requires us to be kind of, Raquel and I talk about this a lot, and I think it's really funny that we keep coming back to being an athlete. When you're an athlete, you do, like, we think about it, you're like, the Olympics happens once every 4 years, but you're training and you're doing other things and you're trying stuff out and you're trying new diets and you're trying all these things in the meantime. So that when you hit that block, and for me, I always think about swimming. When I used to be a swimmer, I would stand on that block, and the minute that I stand on that block and I'm ready to go and waiting for the gun, I am not thinking anything at all. I am just doing and in that flow, and I'm just being. And I think as audiences, because audiences are now concurrently creators and they are creating their own content, they can sniff out someone who is contrived from a mile away. And so the only way to be, which I think is the best thing, which when this happened in music, I was like, when people said, we want the live band back. We want the studio sound, because we don't want, like, the 80s ruined us for synthesizers. I'm so sorry to all of my engineering and producer friends who will disagree with me. I understand, we can fight about it later. But I think that the 80s and 90s were like, we have all the synths, let's use all the synths. Whereas now people are like, we know we have all this stuff. What's authentic is what you can't machine replicate. And that takes training rather than, you know, always that contrived design.
It's the imperfection. There's beauty in imperfection. So you want to be intentional, but it doesn't need to be inauthentically perfect. You can tell the difference.
Yeah.
And I hate to be like, I'm such a Gary Vee fan, and I know some people are going to hate that.
I like Gary Vee.
Yes. So I think we are so quick to judge ourselves and our content. And I think you want to be thoughtful, right? Like, obviously I want to have generally, like, sometimes my TikTok stuff, there might be a few things in there that I wouldn't put on Instagram because different, but just in terms of professional, whatever. Anyways, that said, you want to be thoughtful, but at the same time, you don't know what the hell is going to work, what's going to stick. And so I think being okay with things flopping, not worrying about it, trying something else. Like, you know, I don't know if you guys saw that cranberry juice, the guy who was skateboarding down the road with the ocean spray cranberry juice. Yes, and he wasn't doing anything, and that was the biggest promotional piece for Ocean Spray ever in its history. It was the most a successful advertisement ever, and it was not on purpose, right? Like, you never know.
Did he get paid afterwards?
I think they gave him like a truck, and I'm sure he's had other benefits like thrown his way, but he was not
intending.
You know.
He was not intending.
Yeah.
That's so.
Yeah.
I wonder whether there's a future of that, of like accidental ad campaigns.
It's
where
happening.
Someone's
Yeah.
like, now, wait, what do I have? What do I have to? My hotel? What can I accidentally drop in to this and get some money and just send somebody an invoice afterwards and be like,
Maybe.
No, I'm the worst. I'm the worst at advertising anything, except for commercials. Apparently, I'm very good at being myself. Okay, great. I love that. I love that. I love the branding. I love that this is such a hybrid of real estate, but also the creativity. Because one of the things that I have a lot of respect for, my older sister studied real estate for a while, and did a short stint with Engel and Volkers, I think, in Hong Kong. To me, it's that traditional feeling of having an investment, but also on the other side of it, you're a creative entrepreneur. And so the branding piece is really present. As a consumer, you're like, oh, how do I like invest and get something kind of stable? And then on the creative piece, you've got this like, here, I'm a creative entrepreneur of some kind. It's so transferable to so many of our audience and our other guests about how to brand yourself by association, rather than trying to sell a product like that streamlined Instagram of like, I sold this. It's very telling rather than engaging. I want to go back to the real estate piece for just a second and say, if you're a creative and you're self-employed, you touched on it earlier, it can be really difficult to qualify for a mortgage. What are some things that you could tell? I know this is location specific, but it tends to be similar in different countries, and I've experienced that. What do you need? You need like a couple of years. How do you start to think about how to set yourself up? And when should you start to think about whether real estate is something that you can potentially get into?
Yeah, again, I think it's as early on as possible. I mean, I'll get to your question, but one of the other things I think we grapple with in a city like Vancouver is that being a renter is so hard, right? And so, the rent prices are high. When the real estate market takes off, you probably have to move, and then you have to go and re-enter the market, get into something way more expensive than what you were paying before, probably crappier place for more money, right? So I think even though I understand that real estate investment is not for everyone, I think one of the most challenging parts is being a renter is just really tough. Right?
Yeah.
So
sometimes
people just want to be a homeowner because they don't want to be a renter. And it's stressful and disruptive. So I think everyone's situation is going to be so different. And as Raquel was saying, you're usually going to need at least a couple of years of reasonable, provable income, right? So I think part of this is about tax planning too, right? Like, how are you situating your income? And I'm going to tell you right now, like, I am the worst with this. Like, I need advice myself because I'm kind of like out there doing whatever. And, if I didn't have a partner who was more structured, I would probably be in big trouble because I'm just, that's just not the way that my brain works. And so I think getting as much advice on how to set yourself up, like how much should you be paying yourself if you're making enough to have some sort of company, how much is enough so that way you're getting the tax benefit, but also enough provable income that's reliable for a lender to feel comfortable with. You're probably going to have higher down payment requirements. What in today's environment, what would that look like? So how do you start putting that nest egg away? And that could be subject to change, of course, but at least you're thinking about it, So
I want to interject that too, because I think that's a really great point. one of the things that I did that I would highly recommend for other people to think about is I went first to a mortgage broker, started collecting information, and then I went to my bank and I found out what I could qualify for with zero idea of what the answers were going to be. I did this just as an exercise with nothing to lose at a point where I was like, I don't know what I can afford, like at all. And actually what I ended up doing was I took what I needed to have, and then I put that against what I currently have, and it set me up with a goal to then ask for a raise and ask for my employer to conduct my review. But I had that intention in mind. Now, if we already too early say to ourselves, we're not earning enough, we're creative, we're self-employed, we're not doing this, we can't do it, we don't even go looking. But I would suggest you go start the exercise, go down that rabbit hole. It won't be a rabbit hole. You'll just find out information, and then you can set actually tangible goals. Because then what I did was I was like, okay, well, at this price, I need to be paid this much money. I need to either make that money with acting, or I need to make it with something else. How do I do external consulting? What do I do? And then I was like, well, I need a 2-bedroom because I need to rent out one of those rooms. And then I said, okay, well, I hadn't lived with a roommate for years on years, but I was like, I am willing to do this now, knowing that I am going to own this place. And that made it make a lot more sense. So don't talk yourself out of the game before you've even looked at the rules.
I think, you're not going to lose anything by talking to someone. You don't have to pay anything up front. And as long as you're transparent with them about where you're at in your field, because I know for me, student loans was a big thing. I still had student loans I was paying off, and she goes, no, you don't have to worry about those at all. I know people who rush paying off their student loans, eating ramen for the next 3 years because they think they won't be able to qualify for a mortgage after. And they're like, it's the lowest interest rate. All we're looking at is how much you pay a month. So if you had blown up credit cards, maybe with like a 26%, yeah, that's a problem. But if you have student loans, that's a really small interest rate, and it's just essentially looking at your salary versus how much you're spending from your salary every month, or income if it's not a salary, towards your debts, and how much do you have left over? Can you pay the mortgage? And realistically, honestly, if it's not working out for you, that's actually a good thing. Like we don't want to have the problem that they had in the States. You don't want mortgages to go out to people who can't actually afford them. If you do not know that you have any stability, no family to help you, no partner, and you have an unstable income, it's maybe not the best for you to get into real estate. Maybe you invest into, different investments.
NFTs.
Yes. Something.
Call Ashley about NFTs.
But it's important, right? You have to juggle those things, and this is what people are helping you with. It's not, no one's trying to keep people out of the market. It's just for your own safety. But you have to talk to someone who's a professional. Oftentimes, if you don't have that, around you already to ask for advice, because I didn't know that. I had no idea. It's like, I have student loans. There's no way I could qualify. And I totally did, for way more than I thought I could. I was like, oh, that's lovely to know. But then I spent it all on my education. So I better not die tomorrow, because it'll be a really shoddy investment.
So Ashley, I know that we're running out of time, but I wanted to ask you, what are your next moves? Your pandemic's hit. You're still doing really well. And you took some time off of social media to kind of
how was it in the pandemic? Was real estate was booming during the pandemic?
Yeah, the first at least two. The first 2-3 months were brutal. Yeah. Just because there were so many unknowns. So there was a lot of fear, a lot of clients they were in the middle of making big decisions. It was a very scary time, and things kind of came to a halt, right? So that was around the time where I said, okay, I'm going to lean into doing live videos and helping people interact with properties. And I was actually probably one of the first, and became kind of known for it at the time. So that was cool. It was a neat opportunity amongst, some shitty circumstances. And then things picked up, summer last year towards the end of the year, and then this entire year, I don't think anyone expected the crazy pace and prices and like environment that we're in now. So the funny thing is, like, I think a lot of people scaled down their businesses around the slow time, and then suddenly it's like you need an assistant, suddenly you need like all the support, and so it's I think most realtors don't like this busy pace. It's very hard to manage time. It's poor buyers, like running around with buyers, pounding the pavement, hitting brick walls, offers after offers, getting declined. So there's a lot of heavy lifting and little return in those ways, and it's stressful for everyone. But I mean, at the end of the day, it's still been, business has been good and all of that. So I'm not complaining. It's just behind the scenes, a lot more going on. But yeah, I think it has changed perspective. Like, I have some different thoughts about how I want to see my business and what I want to be doing moving forward. And I definitely want to simplify my business a little bit.
And what do you feel like? Where are you going as a leader in real estate? As someone who's social, as someone who's kind of on the kind of, I guess, younger end of the spectrum, just from a purely age-based metric. What do you want?
Yeah, so I've been really involved in quote unquote leadership. And that's been a phenomenal experience, and that's a whole conversation in and of itself. But the big thing, and the thing I love about it, is like, if you're in the right organization with the right people, you're trying really hard to peek around the corner to see what's coming so you can be strategic for the organization. And real estate is one area where, there's been some disruption, but not nearly as much as there could be, and there will be a lot of new business models coming into the space, different players, different, lots of capital being pumped into technology companies. That's definitely going to change the way business is practiced. And I'm all for it. I'm still being involved in the organization, still thinking a lot about the realtors as well. But more like, how do we equip our realtors to really think about the consumers and their experience, so they, have a part to play that's a value add, that kind of a thing. And so, this morning I had 3 hours of interviews with prospective CEOs for our organization, because our CEO's retired. So there's a lot of imposter syndrome, being someone like me sitting on the other end of that equation, right? Or that conversation, talking to some pretty awesome, very experienced people who've done some really cool things, talking about the future. So I really love that. Like, I love my real estate business, but I have to say, this other side of it, I have a lot more fun. I have a lot of fun with that. It's really neat to be like at the table talking about these sorts of things and exploring where things might go, and having some say in the direction is pretty cool.
I agree.
So and like, we're not going to dive deep into NFTs today, but I know they had a big thing early in the year, but then I was kind of introduced from the right person to better understand where the opportunities are. And with real estate and at the real estate board, like, we've been talking about blockchain for some time, and how blockchain technology and smart contracts are going to change the way things are done. And so that's what really piqued my interest in getting involved in that. And so I have some ideas around that in our space. Whether or not I'll be equipped to like do anything is a different story, but I have a lot of ideas. So if you're listening to this and you're interested in blockchain and NFTs and real estate, please reach out to me, because I don't know who to talk to.
Everybody.
But I have some ideas. And so I think I want to grow my business so I'm more productive. But I want to simplify my involvement a little bit. My partner in life is also a realtor, and so he and I, until now, hadn't really been working together. He and I now are going to be working more and more closely, and while I enjoy a front and center role, I might let him take some of that a little more, so that way I have a little more time to explore some of these other things that I think are really fun. Whether or not that's a good idea, time will tell. So. Yeah.
That's wonderful. Yeah. I love that you're just exploring these spaces.
Yeah.
And staying social the whole way through.
Trying.
Well, thank you so much for your time, Ashley. It's been so informative. I love all the places that we went to today, and I love the through line. This is a show for everybody. Everyone will want to listen to this and watch this. It's just really, really important to talk about in so many ways. So thank you for coming and brunching.
Thank you so much for having me. It was awesome.
Thanks, Ashley.
Thanks for listening, Bombshells. In order to continue to elevate, subscribe and don't forget to click that little bell so you can get notified every time we have a new badass brunch. Until next time, stay focused, fierce, and fabulous.